Good morning, everyone. I think we are put and set to start one of the first sessions at the CIWI World Water Week in 2022. Today's session is looking at the cost of inaction in transboundary water management. And we welcome everyone who's already in the call, and we are very glad seeing you here. And we are also glad to welcome all our speakers. I hope everyone is already in now. There were also some technical problems. I hope you managed well to join us on Passable today. I am your host and have some co-hosts, and we also have some co-hosts of the whole session, but they are also going to be speakers. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. So I'm Nora Brown from GIZ. I'm working at headquarters, and I'm basically responsible for developing the transboundary water management portfolio and doing some technical backstopping and innovation knowledge management regarding transboundary water management, of which one part of this is also to looking into these type of sessions to gather knowledge, share knowledge, and network. So today's agenda is having a brief opening, which I'm started right now. There will be spotlight presentations, so very brief presentations of our speakers on different issues to show you some examples how cost of inactions or foregone benefits or benefits of transboundary water management have been looked at. And then we're going to have a panel discussion where you then also will have the possibility as the audience to ask questions. And we also have some prepared questions for the panel, but we also look at the audience questions and the discussions that will come out of that. And then we have a brief closing. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Please note that the chat is on the platform, so on the Passable platform. So if you go to the meeting, you should be able to see the chat. So the chat will not happen on the Zoom call itself, but on Passable. So if you want to post any questions, please do that on the Passable chat. And then, yeah, just enjoy the session, listen and engage. So apart from myself, we also have the co-host Sabine Blumstein from Adelphi. I hope she has joined already. There were some technical issues. So Sabine, if you have joined, do you want to just say a quick word? If not, I would just move ahead. And
it appears she is not in the meeting, Nora. I think she's still having
she's
technical
not
issues.
in the meeting yet. So however, I will introduce her in case she manages to join later. She's with her IT right now. So Sabine is a senior advisor in water and international water cooperation at Adelphi. And she's particularly concerned with the political and institutional framework for sustainable water management and the role of water resources in security and foreign policy. So she also comes with an interesting background into the session. Then we also have Christine. So Christine is going to follow the chat for us. So if you post any questions, you post them to Christine basically, and she will pick them up. If there are a lot of questions, she will also obviously summarize or prioritize or cluster them. So Christine is an advisor at the GIZ where she manages a transboundary water program in the Lake Kiva and Rusizi River Basin. And before her time at GIZ, she worked in the water sector for the US government at both the US Department of the Interior and the US Department of State. So she also comes in with quite a bit of experience in transboundary water management. So briefly looking at our speakers we are going to have today, they are also at the same time the panelists for the panel discussion. So we will introduce them, or Sabine was supposed to introduce them. So maybe I ask the speakers to briefly just say one or two words before you start your presentation about yourself. Sorry for that last minute alternative choice. So we have from each of our co-hosting institutions a speaker, or maybe also two. So there is Chantal Demicron from the Water Convention UNECE. She's going to speak about the work on benefits of cooperation. Then we have Benjamin Pohl from Adelphi. He was also struggling with the technical issues, so I hope that's going to work out. He did some work on the cost of inaction in Central Asia, is going to give us a spotlight on that. Then we have Alyssa Offord from the UNESCO IHE Delft. She is a doctoral candidate, and she's going to present on her work on missed benefits for local communities. And we have Anders Jägerskog, who's at the World Bank, and also the SIVA program. So he's talking about the cooperation in international waters in Africa and their experience. And then Lenka Tamay from Obasacom. So he's giving us some perspectives on the Orange Senku Basin. And then Lucia de Strasser. She's also from the Water Convention. And she is going to give us an example looking at groundwater, so from the Northwestern Sahara Aquifer System. So we have the local level, we have groundwater, we have surface water, we have experiences from programs, regions like Central Asia. And so we are very excited to look into those spotlights and those examples. And so I would just jump ahead in order not to lose a lot of time and hand over to Chantal to give us the very first spotlight. And if Sabine is around, she can then take over.
Thanks a lot, Nora, and good morning, everybody. May I ask you to stop sharing? Yeah, super. So that so I'm Chantal de Milcan. I'm working for the Secretary of the Water Convention, so the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary water courses and international lakes, where I've been working now for more than 10 years. Sorry, I still have problem with sharing. And I've been, among other things, coordinating the work on the benefits of cooperation that is being developed under the Water Convention now since 2012. So that would be the basis for my presentation. So just for introduction to the topic, I mean, just to remind that around the globe, 153 countries are sharing transboundary waters. So these shared water resources are key for development of the basins themselves and also beyond. And therefore, transboundary cooperation is necessary for their efficient management, for their sustainable development of the basins, but also for climate change adaptation and stability, among others. But of course, we all know that transboundary cooperation has a cost. I mean, the core cost of the cooperation itself, such as having a river basin organization, and also the cost related to project and management costs. So it's always difficult to mobilize funds for cooperation, whether it is to initiate the cooperation process, to sustain it on the long term, or even to further develop the scope of cooperation, in particular in the current context of recurrent budget costs. Therefore, I mean, it is key to understand the importance of the benefits that cooperation can generate, or the cost that inaction might trigger. And this is why, and the Water Convention, since 2012, countries, parties to the convention and other countries have requested to work on this topic, on how can we quantify the benefits of transboundary cooperation. And this is also related to the fact that under international water law and the UN Water Conventions, I mean, cooperation is also an obligation. So countries that are parties to these conventions have a natural tendency to reflect on the benefits that cooperating might generate for the riparian countries. So through an intergovernmental process, working with countries around the world, guidance have been developed, which you can see here, policy guidance note on the benefits of transboundary cooperation. It was a 3-year process. It analyzed case studies and experiences from more than 40 basins around the world in terms of how they had identified, assessed, and communicated the benefits of transboundary cooperation. And this is how this guidance was generated. What it shows is that transboundary water cooperation has the potential to generate many significant benefits for cooperating countries, such as accelerated economic growth, improved human well-being, enhanced environmental sustainability, and increased political stability. But many challenges can also prevent or delay countries from embracing effective joint management of transboundary waters. And this included because, they might have an incomplete perception of the benefits that could be attained, or that they have actually not discussed together in the basins what they could achieve. So these different steps of the identification, the assessment, and the communication of the benefits of transboundary cooperation can help countries to fully realize the potential benefits of cooperation, including by uncovering previously overlooked benefits. And this can also help to identify opportunities arising from increased cooperation, so kind of prospective additional benefits. As you can see on the slide, such benefits of transboundary cooperation might result both from the improved water management, but also all aspects related to enhanced trust that is also key in this cooperation process. And these benefits are of different types as mapped on this typology of benefit that was developed. Economic benefits, such as, for example, expanded activity and productivity in economic sectors, such as agriculture, energy, and so on. The social and environmental benefits, such as increased water quality, resulting in positive health impact. Regional economic cooperation benefits, for example, the development of regional markets that might be for agricultural products, but also we'll see later of energy trade, and the peace and security benefits that are result in increased geopolitical stability, for example. And it's also not to forget that all the governance benefits that can be generated from the cooperation process. I'm already reaching my time, so just to say that this policy guidance has been applied already under the convention in 4 basins around the world, and it has concretely helped cooperation process, for example, in the Siom-Alabama-Lakisi Basin between Uganda and Kenya, where an MOU of cooperation is being finalized, and in the Kubango-Kavongo River Basin, where in parallel to a multi-sector investment opportunity assessment led by the World Bank, it informed the revision of the existing OCACAM agreement. I'll stop with this. Thanks a lot.
Excellent, Chantal. Thank you very much. And I would love to just move ahead to Benjamin, but he still didn't manage to join the meeting. So passable support, I would ask you to kindly send him that link again. The one you sent previously was leading to a different meeting. Thank you. So Alyssa, I hope you're not too surprised. I would just move over to your presentation, please.
Thank you, Nora, and happy to jump in. I'm just sharing my screen right now. Can you all see it? Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Offit. I'm a doctoral candidate in water conflict, cooperation, and diplomacy at the IHE Delft Institute for Water Education and the Delft University of Technology. My research focuses on the multi-scalar interactions between water quality, conflict, cooperation, and environmental justice in Transboundary Basin. And as part of my role at the Institute, I also work in our Water Peace and Security Partnership and as part of our water diplomacy initiatives, so seeking to work in environmental conflict resolution at different scales. And today I wanted to talk about another frame for looking at the costs of inactions, which would be the missed benefits for local communities. So when we think of transboundary water management, it's quite common to think of governments, but important to remember that water systems have a direct connection to the health, livelihood, and quality of life of local actors, and in particular, riparian communities. And given that approximately half of the world's population resides in a transboundary basin, this really underscores the importance of considering the costs and missed benefits of inaction within these communities. So several studies have started to analyze this link between transboundary conflict and cooperation and the impacts that it has. However, and so I'm just going to provide a quick example of one that looks at the distribution of power, risk, and vulnerability both amongst stakeholder groups and also over time in transboundary basins. And so you can see just an example below. I won't get into the details, it's not important, but we can track kind of the different distributions we see in stakeholder groups through different periods of inflection of conflict and cooperation between riparian states. And studies like this give a great opportunity to both assess a range of impacts. For instance, in this case, we're looking at the biophysical as well as the social, political, and economic factors that shape influence and water stress. But then also through this temporal nature, give us an opportunity to really see what are the potential costs and benefits of both inaction and action to justify the decisions made by transboundary governments. So I know we're short on time, but to give kind of a high-level overview of some of overarching findings, one thing that's very observable is that inaction can stem from both absent transboundary management as well as ineffective management. So where cooperation occurs, but it's not necessarily implemented or backed by substantive efforts. And when this occurs, this can cause both irreversible damage, like the loss of endemic species, as well as compounding issues like increasing contaminant loads that not only complicate future interventions, but of course prolong the costs for local communities in terms of their health and water insecurity, and through less direct impacts like the availability of fish protein as a food source, as well as livelihood opportunities. And as well, when we see this action not being taken by the government, it leaves the onus of response on the local communities themselves. And from a brief overview of various cases, we've seen a range of responses from advocacy and lobbying, as well as to protests like those that occurred in Peru in 2011 or Basra in 2018, and at times violence. And given the magnitude of response, this has clear implications for the security of communities as well as government legitimacy, therefore having spillover implications at a national and international level as well. However, there's also some good news from the study. We also saw the benefits through this analysis of looking at the benefits of action, and could observe that in various cases, concerted efforts were really able to reduce risk for communities. And also through the formalization of cooperation, that these joint bodies could create formal processes and representation for stakeholder groups that then provided them access to a joint platform to resolve disputes peacefully. In addition, this representation also was able to strengthen coalitions across borders, presenting opportunities for track 3 diplomacy that, although not quantified, add to gains for cooperation. So overall, this analysis of a really stakeholder, local-oriented approach provides promise for showing really the impacts of inaction as well as the potential missed benefits, and can be used as another line of evidence to justify cooperation and effective cooperation taken by states. Of course, there's limitations, and these analyses can be strengthened through enhanced input of affected communities, including through adding the insight on perception of risk and intervening factors that shape behavioral response, such as through community surveys or interviews, like I'm currently doing in my research, as well as introducing combined hydrologic and human response models and linking those downstream responses to decisions made upstream to really concretize what are the downstream impacts of transboundary management decisions. And with that, I will turn over the floor.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Alyssa. Very exciting looking at the level of local effects as well and this new approach you're looking into. Anders, I would right away hand over to you and see what you have to say from your perspectives.
Okay, thank you very much, Nora, and thanks everyone for joining. It's great to see so many participants. I think we've already heard quite a good outline of potential benefits, but just briefly about myself, I manage the SIVA program, which is the largest transboundary trust fund in the World Bank, focusing on Africa. Which is about a 200 million trust fund where we are supporting countries and regional organizations in Africa to advance transboundary water management. But just briefly on the way that we look at the risk of inaction. One way that we think is useful is to look at it from a risk management perspective. And we argue, and this is based on a review of both our global portfolio, but also the one in Africa, that there are significant development opportunities that run the risk of being missed if we do not address transboundary water management. And that is because often development projects way outside of the water sector are either indirectly or directly dependent on the transboundary water. So unless we address that and engage in it, we run the risk of significant development opportunities being missed. We also, as others have also highlighted, see it as a conflict prevention from a conflict prevention perspective. Often it's hard also to quantify these benefits. We are in the process, and this is mainly drawing on work in the Middle East within the World Bank, looking at quantifying some of these benefits, looking at both modeling, economic modeling on what the effects of GDP if countries wouldn't look at and work together on transboundary water cooperation, comparing that to more of a collaborative approach. And early results, but these are preliminary, I like to highlight that, but it shows that if a cooperative path is chosen, about 60% better results from a GDP perspective is possible. So not a 60% increase, but the challenges that, for example, climate change would bring to the region can be lessened by choosing a cooperative approach. And what is interesting here is not only for the actual countries affected, but also looking at trade patterns, etc. It also affects countries in the surrounding nature. So we're in the work of trying to quantify this, not only in the Middle East, but also hoping to take that forward. And that is one of the key aspects that we find is important. And I'd like to stop here and hand it back to Nora and the team. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anders. That's also an interesting perspective. And also don't forget to look at the risks related to not acting in transboundary water management. So I'm now handing over to Lenka. I hope everything is fine from your side. And please briefly introduce yourself, since I think Sabine still didn't join.
Yes, please. My name is Lenka Tamai. I work for the Orange Sinto River Commission, which is an entity established by the states of Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and South Africa. I'm trying to get this in presentation mode. Is it okay?
All good.
Well, thank you very much. I just shared a slide here which has a map just to illustrate that the area that I think about covers this geographic space on the southern tip of Africa. And some of the challenges really which very much relate to water management to a degree. Have to do with water scarcity, water pollution, land degradation in some areas, and just to mention a few. But this is one of the very important river systems in Southern Africa, supporting some of the larger economies in this part of the world. The city of Johannesburg in Gauteng is also supported by that river basin to a large extent. My focus really will just be on the benefits that we did actually some work to analyze and to articulate some of these benefits of cooperation among the states on the water side. And it was categorized, I think, into 3 categories. The first category, without going through them throughout, had to do with the enabling environment. where it was felt that there is the peace dividend, or the benefit of peace, peaceful coexistence among the states, political commitment, confidence, and trust building, which goes along with transboundary water cooperation. Some of the examples that one can quote there, if time permitted, were the water transfers, or the very large water transfers that are taking place in the river basin. The fact that decision-making and strategies through the integrated water resource management plan pathway that we undertook is enabling joint decision-making and actions to implement those. And as well, it's now more possible for communication, especially on water-related issues, to take place more commonly, so to speak. In terms of integrated water resource management, apart from trying to unravel this concept within the river basin, one could say that through cooperation, it's possible to generate more knowledge and exchange, whether it's South-South cooperation or other forms of knowledge exchange. It is taking place, and therefore some skills development in that regard. On the institutional side, I didn't introduce myself into Secretariat of the Orascom. It is felt that the Secretariat is assisting quite substantively in terms of program coordination in all its facets, and the fact that it provides a platform for leadership through the 4 state parties, not just working alone as the Secretariat, of course, but working with the other structures of the Orange River Commission. At the local level, it is felt that there is some degree of increased access to water as a result of cooperation. Income generation projects are being realized, that water security is being more concretely realized, and there is a few programs related to water demand management that are being implemented through this cooperation. This is a particularly challenging area of work, because water scarcity is a challenge within the river basin. There is opportunities for upscaling and replication across the river basin for some of the work that is being undertaken in other areas, perhaps as exemplary field projects. Through the cooperation, we are able to replicate elsewhere. Yes, one could also say that through the cooperation, we are seeing more additional opportunities arising, especially in areas that depict interdependencies among the states. As some may know, some of the countries here are not, let me just say, the countries are not at the same level of economic development, but the interdependency is keeping the peaceful coexistence among the states quite strong. I would like to stop there, maybe having been a bit abstract, but hoping that we can then be guided by questions where they arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lenka. No, it wasn't too abstract. I think you gave some very interesting concrete examples of what you are doing in the Orange Lenka Basin. I would like to hand over now to Lucia de Strasser to give us an example from the Northwestern Sahara Aquifer System, please.
Hello, thank you, Nora, and good morning, everyone. It's really great to be able to contribute to this interesting panel, so I'll do my best with the last presentation. My name is Lucia de Strasser. I work together with Chantal at the Secretariat of the Water Convention, and I work mainly on this so-called water, food, energy ecosystem nexus area of work of the convention. So what I'm going to present, yes, is the case of this Northwest Saharan Aquifer System. groundwater basin, basically, where we did an assessment of the nexus resources and at the same time an assessment of the benefits of cooperation. So we applied sort of two methodologies to this case at the same time. The main issue in the basin is water abstraction. So as you can see in this picture at the top of the slide, from the 70s, it was relatively, these are water abstraction points. From the 70s, it was relatively scattered, and now it's really widespread and unsustainable. This is mainly due to agricultural water use. Agriculture became more higher value, thirstier crops, and more widespread across the basin. So what we did there was to facilitate dialogue across the countries and across the sectors, so involving stakeholders from different sectors and from the different countries, where we discussed the issues, possible solutions, and most importantly, joint prioritization of what are the main issues and what are the most what are the best possible solutions we have, and how we can implement them together. Basically, they can implement them together. So on the right side, you have basically the skeleton of our technical analysis, which was carried out also with an integrated model, water, energy, land, to study water, energy, and land, basically. So we started from, okay, where are the irrigated area? How much water is needed for this, for irrigation in this area? This depends on the crops, clearly. Where does the energy comes from, and how much energy is used, and how can energy maybe come from other sources, in particular solar, that is highly available there. And then to complement this more technical study, we also did this analysis of benefits, as Chantal was presenting. We looked at the benefits of transboundary cooperation, which are very broad, but also we looked more specifically in this case at the benefits of implementing a nexus approach. So really cooperating across the basin, also in the different sectors. This means that we're looking at different layers. We're looking at transboundary water cooperation. We're looking at cooperation in the agricultural sector across the countries. We're looking at the cooperation in the energy sector across the countries, and cooperation across the sectors. A lot of different things. There were a lot of achievements already that the countries could see and identify coming from transboundary cooperation. First of all, the basin has a consultation mechanism, so a framework for technical cooperation that is in place since 2006. This allowed them to have to reach consensus on the status of water resources and what are the vulnerable areas and the main issues there. And overall, throughout time, they really accumulated a strong knowledge base on resources, at this point also on energy and water, but at the basin level, ecosystems as well, stakeholder analysis, and so on. So there is a lot of knowledge accumulated. This has brought some concrete benefits. I'd say the most important probably is that this whole information base informed development and planning in some areas locally, in particular deciding where to expand irrigation or how to look at possible other sources where the water must be protected. And also, as a result of the Nexus assessment, the countries came up with a joint prioritization of issues, objectives, and actions, and we have what so-called a package of 15 Nexus solutions to be implemented across sectors in the basin. And okay, of course, depending on how the transboundary cooperation evolves, there could be many possible benefits. I think we've seen a lot in the previous presentations. Here is just selected examples. I think it's useful maybe to look at cooperation in another sector. In this case, agriculture, which is the most important in the basin. Of course, acting on agriculture at the basin level, so
countries altogether would have enormous impact on the way water is used and how it can be controlled, this abstraction and pollution of the upper layers of the aquifer. Overall, we estimated that investment in improving irrigation efficiency could reduce demand up to almost 50%. And for example, decisions in agriculture of deciding to invest in more salt-resistant crops could, of course, reduce water use and also reduce the demand of water in the future. We will need to desalinate the water from groundwater in order to make it suitable for agriculture. And it's important to start thinking in terms of agricultural decision first. And although we didn't quantify this, we looked at the benefits of cooperating in the agricultural sector at the regional level. So for example, but valorizing local products, maybe labeling products that come from the SAS basin, or improving trade of agricultural technologies that can have an impact on the smartness of the agricultural sector. These, of course, would bring ultimately an enhancement of water security and better resilience of local communities to climate change and to the other stresses. And as was said before, reduction of potential sources of conflict locally. I think the main message from my presentation would be that transboundary water management is essential because it also serves to complement cooperation in other sectors. So imagine that cooperation in the agricultural sector makes the sector really smarter here and more advanced, and then as a result, water use increases. So then this would be the real cost of inaction. We would have, as was mentioned in another presentation, the cost of cooperation that is not that is at the end ineffective. So yeah, the main message is to assess the cost broadly. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lucia. That was interesting to see what all can also be done with aquifers. So I assume Benjamin didn't yet manage to join for technical reasons. So in case you did manage to join, just open your mic and tell me. So if I don't hear anything, I will just permit myself to just share his presentation so it's not getting lost and you can still see the work of Adelphi in Central Asia. So I would just go through his slides and read them out. So Adelphi has a few years ago done some work on cost of inaction in Central Asia. And there is also a publication available regarding that. I think we also shared that on the event page. So if you want to know any details, since Benjamin is not here to reply to your questions, you can also refer to that, and the contacts of Adelphi are being shared as well. So they looked at the cost of inaction resulting from limited cooperation, different direct costs, indirect costs, similar to those different levels of benefits that also Chantal presented at the beginning. So the costs of inaction are very significant, though hard to quantify. And they found also that the business as usual means further increasing risks and costs. So they actually did try to quantify it and came up with a $4.5 billion per annum if there is only a limited cooperation, and so they added up those different sectoral costs basically to this sum. So the results that were used to communicate these costs of inactions were that water cooperation is not some concession, but a core national interest. They also used the message that a default of limited cooperation is bad, but default is not destiny. and that the potential benefits of improved cooperation are enormous, and countries can enhance their welfare by cooperating. So their recommendation from their work is that don't assume that policymakers actually know the cost of inaction, especially when it comes to indirect costs, and shifting the logic from benefits of action to cost of inaction can help the argument. So here you also see the contact of him. I share that also again at the end of the session. So these were basically our spotlights. And just to briefly summarize, so Chantal gave us a great overview of the various different benefits that could or can be looked at and were already looked at. And then Alyssa showed us a new approach to look at the effects on local communities, and she's currently doing some research on that. So we're looking forward to the results. Anders emphasized the importance to look at the risks and the lost development opportunities from inaction, and Lenke gave us some really concrete examples what Rossecom is doing and which benefits were already achieved and which benefits are being seen. And then Lucia showed benefits that can or were achieved at a transboundary aquifer level across different sectors. So I hope that gave a lot of food for thought. And now I actually would like to ask all the speakers to open the video, and maybe to everyone else to close the video. So hoping that then the audience can basically see only the speakers. And the panelists now, because now we're going to move into the panel discussion. So I can, on my screen, I only see Lucia, but that is also fine. So what is then for the speakers? So what is basically your main takeaway now from those presentations you have heard? Was there any new thought you got from that, from those spotlight presentations? Maybe Chantal.
Thanks a lot, Nora. I mean, maybe few ideas coming out of these different presentations. I mean, there are these two different focus, whether you look at the benefit or the cost of inaction. I would say that at the end, they are quite similar. I mean, you identify the cost of inaction based on the benefit you can quantify. For example, what if you don't cooperate and prevent floods? You will assess this cost related to floods by previous cost of previous floods. So the benefits of a cooperation, of course, of inaction are quite similar. What we see from our work, but I see it's also from the other cases, is that, I mean, there are also different aspects, the benefits, but also the beneficiaries. And this is also an important question, how these benefits will be shared between the different beneficiaries in the basin. So any discussion on the benefits of cooperation also need to do a mapping of the stakeholders of the basins and the potential beneficiaries, because this will also influence a lot decision makers in investing further in cooperation. And then another point that we saw is that, I mean, initially the request we got under the convention was, how can I quantify these benefits of cooperation? This was the mandate we got from our parties. And this resulted extremely hard to actually find well-established methodology that will never be contested. Any quantification exercise of the benefits of cooperation means that you need to do some assumptions. And there are several experiences, and most of them are actually not documented because they result in problems between the countries, that these assumptions are often at some stage, either early or late in the process, being contested by one of the reparent countries. And there are even some examples, not documented again, that quantification of the benefits of cooperation actually stopped cooperation processes because it highlighted some kind of imbalance between the countries, you know, on the distribution of benefits. And this is why our recommendation is first start with a deep discussion to identify this broad range of benefits, because often the cooperation processes, whether at the initial stage or later, are focusing on the really limited number of benefits which are related to improved management, but all these indirect benefits, so these benefits related to trust building, are extremely difficult to quantify, and they are often not even identified and taken into account in the decision-making processes. So a first stage of involving the different countries, the different sectors in a transboundary dialogue around the benefits already generated and prospective benefits can actually unlock several processes and prompt cooperation. And we have example of this where, for example, this methodology, this typology of benefits was used in the Putumayo Basin between Colombia and Peru, and in the Senegal-Mauritanian Aquifer Basin between Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, and Mauritania at the very initial stage of cooperation to can guide the dialogue, and this continued. Now cooperation processes are ongoing. Thanks.
Thanks. Lenka, what was your main takeaway from the presentations, and how is it in the Orange Senku Basin? How is the discussion evolving? Is it more around benefits, or is it more about cost of inaction?
Well, there's a bit of both. From the River Commission side, we have spent quite a bit of energy in the past trying to articulate the benefits of cooperation, perhaps as a way of seeking more investment by the countries on some of the programs that we were proposing. But I'm hearing, and I think I'm amenable to this kind of approach, that maybe we can find a way of also reporting on the cost of inaction. Because, you know, if you look at our region, the water resources are quite scarce, broadly speaking, and there are areas which are already suffering acute scarcity. I think a lot of the folks on this platform would know about the case of Cape Town, the recent one. And at the moment, there are other regions in South Africa which are also suffering to a very great extent as a result of drought. But you see that the water resources are in areas which are called water towers. Lesotho happens to be one of those, but also Angola and the far north area of Southern Africa. So cooperation is really quite inevitable in our region, but perhaps it's also important to emphasize the cost of inaction. What one is also seeing is that because our economies are relatively small, I can even speak in general in Africa, by cooperating, the countries are able to rally or mobilize the economies of scale, and therefore be able to do bigger projects and programs working together than when they work in isolation one by one. So these are some of the things which I think out of the conversation today, one can kick out and say, maybe there is a need to think about transboundary water cooperation, especially in the context of our region where water scarcity is already a very big problem. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Lenka. I'd like to ask another question to Alyssa. What do you think are the opportunities and limitations in assessing the costs of inaction in transboundary water management?
Sure, thank you, Nora, for that question. And I think, you know, to some extent, Chantal and Lenka highlighted those nicely in their responses as well. Of, you know, there's certainly opportunities of looking at the cost and benefit of inaction to really provide motivation to choose to cooperate and to engage in that. And it also is an opportunity to build broader support behind that cooperation as well. So if we're tying it back to more, you know, national population, national communities, it's able to build more of a support and understanding for cooperation if concretizing those benefits is really explained and made clear to everyone participating, and to really gain support for implementing that. I'd say certainly the downsides, as Chantal mentioned, could be that it can stall the process, that if you show different benefits, it can show a disproportionate benefit between participants and disincentivize engaging in cooperation, which is certainly of concern. And I think in that sense, there are steps we need to do to move forward with this, which includes looking at the values that different parties place on different benefits of cooperation and recognizing that it might not translate directly into an economic valuation, but instead of something that more aligns with the value of a different country, along with its economic, along with the other factors that tie into the potential benefits that can occur. And I think one other aspect that needs to be included to keep this from being a downside of valuation is to really ensure that we are looking at the stakeholders participating and who decisions are made for and who is most affected. Because if valuation of the benefits of action or cost of action is made and it isn't considering all stakeholder groups, you might see one opportunity as more ideal, but it's not necessarily considering the unanticipated impacts it'll have on a different group that then might actually tip the scales. And so we need to have a bit of a comprehensive approach that includes stakeholder analysis going into it and considering these broader actions in looking at costs and benefits.
Great, thank you. So you now already moved a little bit into the how we can actually tackle that. So that's good, because then we also want to see if you have any ideas coming from our discussion here and then move forward after this session to actually tackle it. So I just ask maybe one last question before we move to the questions from the audience. So so do you believe that capturing the costs of non-cooperation or inaction can be a game changer, and how could that be done?
Okay, thank you, Nora, for that question. And yes, I do believe that, but I think Chantal and others highlighted sort of the risks associated with trying to quantify some of these. And I like to think, and I think this is what we also heard through looking at these the presentations here. You talk both about intangible as well as tangible benefits. The tangible ones are a little bit easier to quantify. We've been looking at it in the World Bank, and I think one tangible one is the dollar figure on the investments that are generated through support to transboundary waters. That's a tangible figure. It doesn't need to be that contested. I think in our exercise globally through our transboundary programs, it's generated $25 billion of investments over the last 20 years or so, roughly, which is so that's not a challenge as such. But if you get into what I think Chantal was highlighting, the sort of the division between the benefits when you model potential benefits in a basin, if it's very skewed towards one side, or if the model shows that, a model is always a model and there are certain assumptions underlying that, then you have potentially more of a challenge that can lead to political, not conflict, but yes, conflict, not necessarily violent, but that cooperation is breaking up. And here, I think, which was also highlighted by I think Alyssa highlighted it nicely, the importance of engaging stakeholders, communities, etc., to make sure that sort of the intangible, both the tangible but also the intangible benefits of the trust, the human capital, social capital between people groups and different levels in society are being built, and those are hard to quantify, but those are also happening at the same time. I also think what we also heard here is that, and it's also another example of an intangible benefit, that this is through discussing this, and I think in various ways what we've seen here is that there are benefits, and it can help moving a narrative, a discourse away from a sole focus on what if I gain this, if you gain this, I will lose this. Moving away from this zero-sum debates where you can collectively, if you work together, find a joint win-win opportunities. And here again, I think when modeling exercises are undertaken, I speak as much to myself and to the World Bank as an institution as to anyone else. One needs to be cognizant and really work very well with the underlying assumptions, just to make sure that these are trustworthy and you don't create unnecessary conflict. So I'll stop there and hand back to you, Nora.
Okay, great. Thank you. I would actually directly hand over to Christine and ask her if there are any questions from the audience in the chat.
Thank you, Nora. We actually have a lot of questions in the chat. So in the interest of time, I'll do a little bit of prioritization so we can first address the questions that were directly related to the session on TWM costs of inaction. And if we have time, there's some technical questions as well for speakers. So the first question is to all speakers, so anyone feel free to jump in. It's from Tatiana Tumengung from the Economic Consulting Associates. She asks, there are a lot of benefits for TWM and costs of inaction. So the question is, how do you incentivize country actors to cooperate? Different countries have different motives and drives to either cooperate, but also motives to not cooperate. How do you deal with that?
So how do you incentivize different stakeholders to cooperate or countries to cooperate? Anyone wants to jump in? If not, I would ask Lenka, how do you do that at Oasacom?
Well, you have to repeat the question because I lost connection here and there. I just heard, how do you incentivize stakeholders to cooperate or countries to cooperate? Is that the question?
Yes, so within the context of these costs of inaction, but also the benefits of action, how do you incentivize stakeholders to cooperate?
Oh, yeah, you might want somebody else to chip in, because you see, in the Southern Africa region where I work, or where the Orange, the cooperation transboundary waters. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's interrupted, but we hear.
Yeah, because I was going to say that it's basically being hello.
We hear you. We hear you.
Yeah, it's interrupting so much. I'm thinking somebody else could take it. No, it's because we have a regional framework in Southern Africa. So the in-basin part of the work was done a lot earlier than some of us. Operation was a little bit more, let me say, straightforward within the Southern Africa region than many other parts. So I'm not sure if I will be the right person to say, to incentivize, except to say that when countries, sovereign as they are, have that deliberate, they make that deliberate decision to cooperate, then you really have to deliver on the mandate under that framework. And that's what keeps countries going to a large degree, according to myself. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lenka. Yeah, I think you're referring to also the SADC protocols that exist in the Southern African region. So you have this regional layer as well that helps to incentivize the countries where the countries have agreed upon already on a higher level than even the basin. So yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Christine, you want to go ahead with some more questions?
Yes, so the next question is from Dr. Mats Eriksson of SIWI. It's directed at Anders. You mentioned a lack of cooperation may lead to missed development opportunities. Can you provide 1 to 2 examples?
Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed the mute button. Thank you for that question. So lack of missed development opportunities and examples. I think one example could be if there's a lack of cooperation, benefits accruing from, for example, shared or division between where you put agricultural lands, where it makes most sense to have them, and then associated with that also potential for trading between countries. I think we need to look outside of the sort of the water sector direct benefits to broader benefits, and there. If you allocate water where it may make most sense from both an agricultural and perhaps jobs production perspective, those are examples where at least our economic models, with all the sort of the underlying assumptions that we have, shows that if cooperative approaches are chosen in the Middle East context, then you can increase both the GDP, but also importantly the employment numbers in some of these states where you allocate the water more sort of rationally, if you see what I mean. So both agricultural production and also trading patterns and then employment opportunities in these countries.
Great, thanks. Hope that's answering the questions. Those were interesting examples. And Christine, go ahead with the questions. I assume there are more.
Oh yes, there are plenty of questions. So the next one is from Ana Adame, who's from the Mexican Institute of Water Technology. So the question is for all speakers. She says, transboundary water management is indeed a solution for managing the resource when the availability is somewhat constant. How do the costs and benefits translate in a climate change context in regions where there is, quote, normal scarcity? For example, the south of the United States and the north of Mexico, which are mainly arid regions, usually struggle with cooperation in these conditions. But in the face of changing climate and growing demands for agriculture, industry, and urban populations, how can the benefits overcome the costs to motivate a closer water/drought transboundary cooperation in areas like the Rio Grande Basin? It's a long one.
Yes. Any one of the panelists wanting to react to this one?
So if I may just jump in very, very quickly. So not about the Rio Grande, but the modeling we've been undertaking in the Middle East, it actually looks at different climate scenarios, both sort of middle of the road as well as more extreme scenarios. And what we see there is that if countries collaborate, given climate change and climate scenarios, it'll still be a negative effect on economies, GDPs, employments for most of the countries. But what it also shows if collaborative paths are chosen, the negative effects will become significantly less. Of course, differing depending on which climate scenarios you're looking at. But it clearly shows in all scenarios we've run so far that it actually does benefit all the countries, different levels, of course. But if they come together and deal with this, rather than if anyone would just absorb the climate challenges that are assumed under these scenarios by themselves.
Right. Anyone else wants to react to the relationship with climate change and the costs of inactions?
Elisa, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I can just jump in quickly. I think ideally transboundary water management is to be established not just for kind of regular conditions where there's abundant water, but really it is to provide that space to reduce stress when there is water challenges and that regular water scarcity. I know in practice that can certainly be challenging, but the idea of establishing those formal river basin organizations and whatnot provides a platform to really start to navigate and address these issues. And I think if we want to continue to incentivize cooperation along those lines, it's to really consider not just the water itself, but the linkage that the water has to other factors. So when we're looking at cost of inaction, it's looking at what degradation might occur to wetlands if too much water is used upstream, or what does the economic decline downstream have for impacts with trade upstream. And so to really using these opportunities of looking at costs of inaction to justify why cooperation really should still occur and how we can find mutually beneficial solutions, even in times of water stress.
Nora, do I have
Yeah, go
time
ahead.
to add.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would like to add is like, I think these discussions on the identification, the assessment and the communication of benefits needs to be seen as a cycle. I mean, it's not a one-go exercise that you do forever and then it remains the situation. I mean, it's also an opportunity to do recurrent such discussions between the recipients countries to assess the benefits of cooperation in the new reality. So in the reality of the basin affected by climate change impacts. And this is why I think, I mean, it also highlights the importance of having a permanent institutional framework in the basins, like a river basin organization and an agreement that actually provide the basis for such a continuous dialogue. So these are general remarks, but I think also that the example that Lucia presented on the Northwestern Sahara Aquifer system also shows that this dialogue in a basin extremely affected by the impact of climate change and drought also help to include other sectors when discussing about water is not sufficient enough anymore in the context of severe water scarcity.
Can I add to this, maybe? Thanks, Chantal. I think there are some benefits that serve more to motivate cooperation where cooperation doesn't exist or it's very limited. And these are very broad and deserve certain type of exercise of maybe looking at GDP or let's say big figures that serve to motivate cooperation. And then there are, you know, also, and maybe my presentation was moving more towards that, like a consideration of the cost and benefits of doing one thing versus another. And these maybe it's useful to direct cooperation where it does exist already. But all of these exercises are equally important, and as Chantal says, it's a cycle. So depending on what you're looking at, you might want to do it, look at different costs or costs and benefits. Maybe with the occasion, can I just reply to one of the questions that I received in the chat, which was about this figure that I showed about the reduction of water use coming from efficiency. I'm glad that I received this question because this is central. Efficiency in itself doesn't reduce water use, of course. It only indicates that there is a big potential there and that there is a big potential coming from technology. But at the end of the day, it's a political decision and it's a cooperative decision to sort of protect, limit the abstraction of water in that case. And also there was something about stakeholders, also a question about this. Very briefly, it is challenging involving all stakeholders, especially if we're looking beyond the water sector, so to say. Energy stakeholders extremely difficult, but when we look at the costs and benefits, is extremely important to be specific on who benefits, and this was mentioned before, but also who pays, who could pay. And I think involving different stakeholders is crucial, because even those who would pay, say the poorest communities, okay, who are usually the ones who end up paying, okay, they would pay this much, then who could pay for them? Okay, and having this sort of conversation where the money can come from is, I guess, the only way to start discussing on about how to create a basket of funding to fill the gaps needed to finance transboundary cooperation, because the benefits go to different stakeholder groups across sectors, across the countries, across the different levels of society. So if you're interested in that, I invite you really to look at the study on the Saharan aquifer, because at the end we really looked at who can do what. It was really a lot of work, but I think it was extremely important, because you start putting also the responsibility a bit up there, and it's a call for action. So yeah, I mean, you need to have already a discussion, a transboundary discussion, in order to start looking at that, but it's interesting. Sorry for taking a bit of time.
Thanks, Chantal. So Christine, is there any other question in the backup from the audience?
Yes, I mean, we won't be able to get to all questions, but we just had one come in that relates quite well to the topic at hand. So this is from Dennis Okormak, who's from the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda. He asks to all panelists, what kind of approach do you consider to quantify the cost and benefits at local transboundary basin level?
Is that something for Alyssa as well?
I can certainly start. I would say that the approach I've done so far has a quantification on local actors, but it is a very rough quantification. So it's just kind of creating a coarse resolution to understand patterns between actors and over time. I think that if we want to quantify a little bit more concretely, that would have to pull from a lot more of the international efforts that have been done by my fellow panelists. However, I think there is still benefits to really highlighting where, or there's gains to be made from highlighting where these benefits are and potential costs are on a local scale, because it helps to justify the action to participate. But then it also is an important stakeholder analysis that you're doing just in looking at those potential costs and benefits alone. I think there's also more sophisticated methods that could be done, like using agent-based models and really making something a bit more concrete. But I'd like to hand it over to my other panelists in case they'd like to add from their experiences.
And is that the analysis you have done, was it also looking at the local level or more at the economies level?
Were you asking me, Nora? Sorry.
Yes, but I also see your hand is up anyhow.
Okay, yes. Okay, I was going to respond. Yes, I mean, so far it's been at the national economy-wide level, so really not at the local level. But I'm fully supportive of trying to do that. But right now, what we've been focusing on is on the economy-wide impacts, GDP, employment, and so on. So not yet, but hopefully in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Lenka?
Yes, you see, when someone says local level, it really depends how local we mean. Because I could give an example which people from Botswana would know, that there was a time, I think 2012 or so, when that part of the country really had no other source of drinkable water. And then through the cooperation that exists within the river basin, there was a possibility to extend water supply from across the border in South Africa through a very small pipeline. I call it small because it was only 7 meters per second, but it was an international cooperation arrangement, and it was recognized as such, and Orascom, if you allow me to use the word, was glorified in that way. I think maybe a bit more exaggerated, but that is the local level where you see communities really benefiting from cooperation. But the approach of how that can be assessed, perhaps that's for researchers, but the impact, it has to do with satisfying a specific need. And maybe we are being too harsh to ourselves as water people. We should also be looking at other sectors to try to, gather evidence of how the local community is benefiting from this topic. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Christine, is there one urgent, final, very important question we should address?
Yes, we can have for conclusion, this is a bit more general. This is from Bota Sharipova of IHE Delft. The question for all speakers would be, how could you facilitate basins learning from each other's examples? There's a lot of decision makers who are looking for successful examples, but they tend not to attend these types of global events or read English language publications. So what would be alternative ways for them to engage with each other?
Yes, Chantal.
Thanks. I mean, indeed, this is completely true. It's actually quite difficult to reach to the high-level decision-making level. And this is why, I mean, I think you might see in the work that we are all doing, we're often doing some kind of technical analysis, modeling, technical discussion with stakeholders, but then translating this information collected into policy briefs. So this is more to reach out to the people, the decision makers in the basins and in the country. And then if you talk about the global level, I mean, for example, under the Water Convention being a global institutional framework for transboundary water cooperation, several global workshops have been organized, 3 on the topic of benefits of cooperation, enabling exchange of experiences among countries and basins. And also, I mean, the way when the convention secretary, Water Convention Secretary receives a request to support the dialogue on benefits of cooperation in a new basin, then we will often invite other basins to communicate on the work they've done. I mean, I remember, for example, OCACOM presenting in a meeting of the Northwestern Sahara Aquifer System at the beginning of the work to actually share their experience on how they had handled this process and what were the concrete impact. And this actually motivated Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya to go in that direction and to look at these aspects.
Thanks, Chantal. And I believe that this session might help with these issues to facilitate a bit of more learning and peer learning. So we didn't manage to jump over the language barrier this time. But yeah, maybe from GIZ perspective, also we're looking into the opportunities, how we can facilitate peer learning more on a global level between different transboundary water management institutions. So I hope in the future, since it's gaining more and more importance with climate change, was looking at the UN Water Conference coming up, was looking at the COP meetings in Egypt with a focal day in water and so on. Yeah, we are hoping that we have more and more platforms, and we also manage then, while we get attention of the political level, to also not forget about the local level. Yeah, there is a lot of work to be done, and I think I don't want to now do the closing words. I want to hand over to Anders to do that, and I just want to quickly thank all the participants for those interesting questions. I also want to thank the speakers, and hand over to Anders. And meanwhile, I will just share my screen and you can see the contact, so don't hesitate to get in touch. And we will also share the presentations on the meeting platform. Just bear with me, it will take a couple of days, but the video recording will also be shared by CV in the YouTube channel. So please, Anders, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Nora. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the engagement from the participants too. I think it's been an incredibly rich session. There were lots of good presentations, lots of questions. I think the few key points that I take with me, and hopefully that could be of benefit for you as well, is that this is definitely an area where more work is needed. We had interesting discussions on the quantification, the risks, but also the opportunities with quantifying benefits, and also the importance of actually carefully assessing the underlying assumptions when we do this quantification of benefits, because there are risks, as several of the participants highlighted. If we are not having the right assumptions, but also otherwise, it can actually lead to what we don't want to see, namely the breakdown of cooperation between countries. And also, I think the sort of the division between the intangible, which are less easy to quantify, but also the more tangible, which are easier to quantify. I think that's a useful path that we've been working on. I think that also comes through pretty strongly in this one as well. I know we're supposed to end now at 11:20, but I'd really like to encourage everyone to continue to engage with them here. I will for sure continue to engage with the participants here, and I think what I take with me, in addition to what I said, is also that the impetus, the sort of the interest from countries working in basins or that are part of basin organizations or groundwater system organizations. Those are the ones that really should bring all of this together. And from the World Bank perspective, but I think that's the same for all the organizations here. We work for the benefit of them and really seeing where the interest and where they come from. I think that's the key in order to further sort of disentangle both the cost of inaction and on the reverse, the benefits of cooperating. So I'll stop there, Nora. I thank everyone for this great and very rich discussions, and hand back to you.
Great, thank you. So all that remains to me now is to say bye-bye to everyone, and wishing you a interesting day if you have a day purse, or interesting World Water Week if you're fully registered, and just drawing attention that there are also other sessions on transboundary water management, so you might gain more insights from those. And yeah, have a beautiful day, evening, wherever you're sitting. And yeah, come forward through those contacts if you want to engage in cost of inaction, or if you have any ideas or further questions. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.